Hello and welcome to episode 29 of the Dose of Wonder podcast. I'm your host, Caitlin McCall. In today's podcast, I'll be getting into Stoicism, but it's not stoic as in having a stiff upper lip, keeping calm and carrying on. This is about how to deal with modern life and modern problems through ancient wisdom of the Stoic philosophers. So I'm going to be talking about Stoicism, the ancient Greek philosophy, and how it's basically a guide to living your best life. One of the most famous Stoics was Marcus Aurelius, who was emperor of Rome way back around 1800 years ago. And if you haven't read his book Meditations, which is the go-to book, the Bible of sorts, about living life stoically, I recommend it. Meditations was basically Marcus's own private journal, where he wrote about his reflections and thoughts about his life, and it was never meant for anyone else. Imagine if someone got a hold of your private diary and then published it for the whole world to see. But trying to tease out from his meditations and other books on Stoicism how to live life as a Stoic can be difficult. So I thought I'd try to put together the key points in a Stoicism for Dummies guide. Not that you're dummies, of course. Just an easy to understand points. So one thing the Stoics were really big on, and that I'm putting as my number one point, is connection with nature is paramount, which is something you might not think. There's a big emphasis on the natural world. The number of times that Marcus Aurelius writes about nature is amazing, talking about olives falling from trees, wheat blowing in a field. You may think, but he lived like thousands of years ago, before modern technology. They didn't have anything much to do besides being out in nature, right? Well, maybe. But you can't deny how you feel after spending a few hours outdoors walking or hiking around in nature, or even just a 20-minute stroll around your neighborhood. We need to remember that there's a big wide world out there that's helping us live as human beings, helping us to grow the food and supply the water we need to survive. Oh, and of course the oxygen that we need to breathe. Without nature, we wouldn't be here. Nature is key to wisdom and resilience. And I feel like that's something that we often forget, especially today in our busy, crazy, tech-filled lives. So Stoicism is about being the best human that you can be. And this is where the idea of the second point, which is virtuous living, comes in. And that doesn't mean living piously, like some priest or monk, but just basically being a good moral human being. Be honest, just, live in moderation, be wise, have courage to stand up for yourself. That's the 4 virtues of Stoicism, by the way. Wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance or moderation. Other virtues and things we should do to be good, decent people is have compassion, integrity, be generous, and have some self-control, goddammit. These aren't mentioned to be overwhelming. Think of them as guiding principles for navigating the challenges of life and making choices you can be proud of, qualities to strive for in your everyday life. So it's more about aligning your actions with your values. But you might be asking, isn't there a risk of trying to be perfect all the time? Well, that's where another core Stoic principle comes in, number 3, which is worry about what's in your control. This is what all those memes and inspirational quotes floating around the internet tell us. Only use your energy on things that are within your control and don't focus on the things that are outside of your control, which is pretty much most things, to be honest. Focusing on what's within your control, how do we actually put that into practice? Well, it starts with a really simple realization. We can't control everything that happens to us. We can't control the weather, traffic, other people's actions, even sometimes things that happen to our own bodies. But here's the good part. We can control our reaction. We can choose how we interpret situations and how we respond to challenges and what actions we take. So it's not about pretending everything's fine. It's not about denying anything when it's not. It's about acknowledging and choosing how to move forward. But you might be wondering, how do we figure out what to focus on and what to let go of? This is point number 4. Stoicism encourages us to see things as good, bad, or indifferent. Sometimes things we think are good don't necessarily turn out that way. And bad things sometimes turn out to be good in the end. And things that you're indifferent about, well, don't worry about those. Don't waste any time or energy on stuff that you're indifferent about. That's just crazy talk to do so. But just get clear on what's important to you and what isn't. And focus on the good stuff. Forget about the bad and ignore the indifferent. But the Stoics aren't saying that we should totally ignore the bad stuff either. It's more about clarifying your values and your priorities. So asking yourself what is truly good, what is actually bad, and what things in the grand scheme of things don't actually matter. It's like when we often get stressed about things that are ultimately not really important, things that you can be indifferent about. They don't really affect our well-being. So it can really help to let go of unnecessary worry and focus your energy on things that really matter. This might make you rethink how you approach things. It's like Stoicism kind of gives you this mental toolkit for dealing with life's curveballs, and it doesn't stop there. Another key principle, number 5 of 10, is action over inaction. Stoicism is about taking action in the world and making a difference. So it's not just sitting around thinking about stuff. We need to be less selfish and work towards something bigger than ourselves, which I've talked about in previous podcasts, like last week. We need to come together for the collective good of all. And this could even be in small ways, like recycling plastic bottles or picking up discarded fishing line so it doesn't injure other wildlife. These may seem like small actions, but they show that even our individual efforts can contribute to the collective good and can make you feel like you're part of something bigger. It's a reminder that small acts of kindness or responsibility can have a ripple effect. Point number 6 is a really fascinating Stoic concept that I've mentioned before. In Latin, it's called premeditatio malorum, or more simply, doing a pre-mortem, which is kind of like a post-mortem, where we figure out what happened after the fact. A pre-mortem is looking into the future and trying to figure out everything that could happen or go wrong, so we can mentally, and maybe physically, prepare for it. It's a super practical tool for decision-making and managing anxiety. It's about proactively thinking through potential obstacles and setbacks before they happen. You might think, isn't that setting yourself up for negativity? Well, no. Think of it like this. You're about to go on a big trip, so you do a pre-mortem. You might consider flight delays, lost luggage, getting sick. And so by thinking about those things in advance, you can be prepared. You can pack extra medicine, make backup travel arrangements, and just be mentally prepared if those things actually happen. And so it's not about dwelling on the negative, it's about being prepared, so you can handle it, and you can reduce your anxiety. So this is about your best chances of success. And it's about being prepared in any situation, not just mentally, but practically too. And this ties into another big Stoic principle, number 7, acceptance. We need to try to accept things outside our control. This is a reminder that you can do your very best to plan for things, like the pre-mortem, but you also need to give yourself some grace and some humility, and know that the outcome of anything you do is ultimately beyond your control. So we can prepare, but sometimes things just don't go our way, no matter how hard we try. You can plan all you want, and sometimes life just happens. So that's where acceptance comes in. So how do we accept those things without giving up, without just becoming apathetic? It's a subtle difference, but it's an important one. Stoicism encourages us to accept what is, but without resigning ourselves to it. It's about acknowledging what we can't change, but not letting it paralyze you or make you lose hope. That leads us to one of the most philosophically challenging concepts, number 8, amor fati, which I talked all about in episode 23 of my podcast. And it means love your fate. It's a term that was created by famous philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche. Love your life, no matter what happens in it. Love all of it, all experiences, because they make you who you are, and you are here to experience and live your life. So bad or good, ups or downs, take it all in and love it. It's about embracing everything in your life. The good, the bad, the messy, the beautiful, as essential parts of your journey. Are we supposed to just smile and pretend that everything's great? No. It's not about pretending or denying difficult emotions. It's about recognizing that challenges are an inevitable part of life. They shape us, teach us, and make us who we are. So instead of resisting or resenting the tough stuff, we should try to see it as part of the bigger picture, even if we don't always understand it, don't understand the pattern. And this leads to Stoic point number 9, the idea that obstacles can be opportunities. One thing I've realized in the last few years of overcoming obstacles like grief and loss in my life is that there's such a thing as post-traumatic growth, rather than just PTSD, which is the subject of podcast 27, if you listened to that one. And if you haven't, I recommend you do. And it's the idea that if you look at things in a different light and change your perception about the obstacles in your life, you can sometimes see that there are opportunities to be found within them. Silver linings. Overcoming obstacles or any hurdle in your life can make you stronger and more resilient. So that, if nothing else, is a positive. Post-traumatic growth is the idea that even incredibly painful experiences, like grief, loss, or trauma, can actually lead to positive change. It doesn't minimize the pain, but it acknowledges the possibility of growth and transformation. So even though we might not choose those challenges, we can choose how we respond and what we learned from them. This is really life-changing. It can be applied to your whole approach to life. And Stoicism is all about shifting your perspective, finding the good even when things are tough, and then taking action to make things better. As Christopher Robin from Winnie the Pooh says, "You are braver than you believe, stronger than you seem, and smarter than you think." So obstacles aren't always plain old bad and awful. There are nuggets of opportunity to be found in them, if you look hard enough and in a certain way. And speaking of shifting perspectives, let's talk about the final Stoic concept I want to get into today that is super relevant to modern life: mindfulness. You might be surprised and think that it's a modern thing. A lot of people do, because mindfulness is such a big buzzword these days. But what does it mean exactly? Basically, just be present as much as you can be. Stoicism has been emphasizing mindfulness for centuries. It's all about being present, paying attention, and truly experiencing each moment. Be aware of what's going on in your mind, your thoughts and emotions, your actions, your life. Instead of sleepwalking through your days, really be there and pay attention. Notice the colors of the sunset instead of checking your social notifications. Savor the smell of the coffee in the morning. Really taste and enjoy that delicious muffin you're eating. Pay attention to others when they're talking to you. Really listen, not just think about what you're going to say next, or noticing that stain on their shirt. Or, as with my husband, playing songs in your head constantly, and then going, "Huh? What did you say?" So it's like an antidote to all the distractions and anxieties of modern life. It's like hitting the pause button and savoring those simple things. Like I said, it could be as simple as noticing the warmth of your coffee cup in your hand, or the vibrant colors of a sunset, or truly listening to someone without interrupting or letting your mind wander. It's about slowing down, being present, and appreciating those little things that we often miss. And that brings us back to that core idea of focusing on what's in your control. By being mindful, we're choosing to focus our attention on the present moment rather than getting caught up in worries of the past or anxieties about the future. So we're taking back control of our minds and choosing where to direct that energy. So in summary, basically, the 10 points are: get outside, be a good person, focus on what's in your control, get clear on what's important to you, take action, plan for the worst, learn acceptance, love your whole life, there are silver linings in everything, and be present. And now let's explore how to put these Stoic principles into practice in our own lives. So at the start, I talked about how Stoicism encourages us to be the best humans we can be, but it's not enough just to think about it. You actually have to put it into action. Stoicism is a philosophy of action. It's about taking what we learn and applying it to our everyday lives. It's about making those choices that match up with our values and making the world a little bit better. But how do we actually do that? In a world that often feels completely out of control? Well, it's definitely a practice, and not something you achieve overnight. It starts with recognizing that while we can't control those external events, we can control our reactions to them. We always have a choice in how we interpret a situation and how we respond. Like I've said a lot in the past, it's not about pretending everything is fine or suppressing your emotions. It's more about cultivating what you might call emotional resilience. That balance between feeling your emotions fully and not letting them run the show. It's like you're the captain of your own ship, even when the seas get rough. And this brings us back to that idea of acceptance, recognizing that life has joy and sorrow, good times and bad. But how do we accept the tough stuff without just giving up? This is a subtle difference, but it's a really important one. Stoicism isn't about passively accepting whatever happens. It's about acknowledging what we can't change while still striving to make things better. It's that balance between acceptance and action. We accept what is, but we don't just sit back and let life happen to us. We take responsibility, because I tend to get really stressed when things don't go my way. I guess probably most of us do. But what if I try, and you try, to approach those situations with more of a Stoic mindset? Remember that concept of amor fati, love your fate? It's about embracing all aspects of your life, even the tough stuff, as necessary parts of your journey. But I think a lot of people might struggle with that. How can we love the painful parts of our life? As I said before, it's not about denying or suppressing those difficult emotions. It's more about recognizing that challenges are an inevitable part of life. They shape us, they teach us, and they make us who we are. So instead of resisting those challenges, we can try to see them as part of a larger story, even if we don't understand the plot. And that reminds me of that concept of post-traumatic growth that I touched on earlier. That idea that even after going through something truly awful, people can come out stronger, even more compassionate. So even though we might not choose those challenges, we can choose how we respond and what we take away, like we're co-authors of our own life stories. And this idea of responding in a virtuous way brings us back to virtuous living. We talked about how those core virtues of wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance, and there are a few others that are also essential for living a good life, which are compassion, integrity, generosity, and self-control. Stoicism reminds us that our character is built through our choices and actions, not just our thoughts. So it's not just about being a good person in your head, it's about walking the walk and making those choices that reflect those virtues in your daily life. So how do we do that? Well, it's much easier when you have self-awareness. And that's where mindfulness comes in that I talked about earlier, as a way to be more present, focused on the here and now. And by cultivating mindfulness, we become more attuned to our thoughts, our feelings, and our motivation. And this helps make more conscious choices that align with our values. It's like that pause button to make sure you're not just reacting on autopilot. You're actually acting in line with your values. And it helps us break free from those habitual patterns, those habits that aren't serving us, that might not be serving you well. And it's not just about sitting on a meditation cushion. There are ways to practice mindfulness in everyday life. Like I said, as simple as listening to someone without interrupting them or letting your mind wander, or savoring each bite of your meal instead of just mindlessly shoveling it in. So it's about bringing that mindful awareness to all aspects of what you're really experiencing, accepting and appreciating the present moment, even when you're doing boring stuff. It's about choosing to focus on what we can control, our attention, our attitude, our responses, rather than getting swept away by things that we can't control. It's so easy to get caught up in worries about the past, or anxieties about the future, as I said earlier. But mindfulness helps us ground ourselves in the present moment, which is really the only moment we ever have any control over. It can help us manage stress behaviors, cultivate gratitude, and make choices that are aligned with our values, which is really at the heart of what Stoicism is about. We've talked about accepting what we can't control and focusing on what we can, and responding to challenges in a virtuous way. And now we're seeing how mindfulness can help us put it all into practice. It's a beautiful tapestry of interconnected ideas, and it's all about helping us live more fulfilling, meaningful, and resilient lives. So next, I'll delve into specific strategies and practices that can help you bring a little more stoicism into your world, no matter what challenges you're facing, and how to actually make it work in your everyday life. It's one thing to understand, but it's another thing to actually put it into practice. So let's talk about some concrete ways to bring a little more stoicism into your world. What are some simple but effective ways to start? Well, one of the most powerful, and it stood the test of time, is journaling. Remember Marcus Aurelius and his journal Meditations? He was a busy guy. He was an emperor, but he still made time for reflection. But what should we be writing about in our Stoic journals? It doesn't have to be complicated. Just start by reflecting on the principles we've discussed. What resonates most with you? What challenges are you facing right now? How might Stoicism help you navigate those challenges? So, for example, if I'm feeling really stressed about work, I could use my journal to explore that Stoic idea of control. Like, what can I actually control in the situation? What can you influence? And what do I just need to let go of? So journaling can help you process your thoughts and emotions and identify those unhelpful patterns, and to start develop those more stoic responses to the things that life throws your way. It's like having a little stoic coach in your notebook. And speaking of practical tips for how to incorporate stoicism into your daily life, one simple but powerful practice is to start each day with a stoic meditation or reflection. Just take a few moments to remind yourself of the principles you want to embody. It's like setting an intention, a reminder to approach whatever comes your way with wisdom, courage, and resilience. And then as you move throughout your day, just look for those opportunities to practice mindfulness, which is key: paying attention, savoring, really listening. It all ties together. Mindfulness helps us stay grounded in the present, and that can make it easier to apply those other Stoic principles, like focusing on what we can control and accepting what we can't. Another great tip is to practice gratitude. Take a few moments each day to reflect on things you're grateful for, no matter how small. Sometimes it's the simplest things. Sometimes it's the simplest things that we take for granted. A warm cup of coffee, a good laugh with a friend. And gratitude is a really powerful antidote to negativity and complaining. It helps us shift our focus from what we lack to what we already have. It's about recognizing the abundance that already exists, even in the midst of challenges, and even when things are tough. Now, here's something I think is really important to remember. As you start experimenting with these Stoic practices, Stoicism isn't about being perfect. It's about being real. Nobody's perfect. We're all going to have moments when we don't react in a way that aligns with our Stoic ideals. I mean, we're human, not robots. The key is to be kind to yourself and learn from those moments and keep practicing. So it's about noticing when we fall short, but not beating ourselves up about it. Acknowledge it, learn from it, and try to do better next time. Give yourself grace. Be patient. It's a journey, a lifelong journey, not a destination. After listening to this podcast, hopefully, maybe you'll feel like you've gotten a whole new perspective on how to approach life's challenges. And you don't have to adopt every Stoic principle all at once. Start with one or two that resonate with you, and just see how they can make a difference in your life. It's about finding what works for you and incorporating it in a way that feels authentic and sustainable. And the more you practice, the more natural it'll become. And over time, you'll find that Stoicism is more than just a philosophy. It's a way of life. It's a way of life that can help us navigate the ups and downs, all of it, with more peace and purpose. So explore these principles, experiment with those practices, and see how they can help you live a more fulfilling and meaningful life. And to all of you listeners out there, I want to leave you with a final thought to ponder. Imagine incorporating just one of those Stoic principles into your day to day. How might it shift your perspective or change the way you approach a challenge? And that's it for this week's podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. Next week, I'm diving back into self-improvement and talking about why it's important to not make yourself small. Until then, thanks for listening, and don't forget to live with a dose of wonder.